And well, thank you very much, Fel, for this incredible episode.
Yeah, no problem.
I have to be honest. Uh, no offense to any of the previous guests, I have three times more questions than I have ever had for any of the other characters.
Well, I gave a lot of I said a lot of like names and stuff, so I'm sure you there's a lot you could go off of there. Um,
Absolutely.
I've also done my best to like that the I guess I don't know if this is one of your questions, but that was the character of one of my PCs in a game that I DM, and he's one of my I love all of their stories, but I really like he and the player and I worked really hard on his backstory, and
Oh wow.
it's a really fun character. He's gone through a lot, and I've tried to consolidate like over like a year's worth of sessions, and also his backstory into like a couple of just a very short amount of time. But yeah.
No, damn. I mean, well, in one swift go, you've actually answered three questions. Because my first question,
Yes.
my first question was because I was going to work backwards actually, fun enough, which was this a collaborative effort between the DM and the player? And you've obviously answered that.
Yeah.
This was you as a DM, I believe. And
Yeah, so I reached out before we began this campaign. Me and this group of guys had been playing D&D together for a while, but it was all kind of like one shots, one attempt at a campaign. And when that campaign fell through, I was like, "Hey, I want to DM like for the near future." This is like the classic backstory to becoming the eternal DM. Um,
yeah,
but I asked them all before the campaign began. I said, "Look, like we can you can do as little or as much backstory as you want, but like please, if you're doing backstory, like I would love to be involved." And it was just start with a class and like a vague idea, and then we'll go back and forth. And they wanted to know like what's the country, what's the continent like, where can I put myself, and we worked pretty hard on it. And I was happy with the
no,
things that we were able to like achieve out of it.
honestly, it's a fantastic backstory. I was actually going to ask a second part to that, which again you answered really quickly. Obviously, as I said, the collaborative backstory, but also the what part was it of the backstory end and the actual part of it begin? And obviously, that was when you cut at a certain point in the episode, and you actually said. Would you like me to continue? Of course, I'm not going to say no to that because I was hooked. I
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
anyone's
that
going to
was
complain about that, to be honest.
the start of the game was like the start of the campaign is with all of the party members on a train headed into the middle at the very center of the continent that I created, because the whole campaign is homebrew. The very center of the continent is like this place called the Wastes, which is like this like snowy, very scary, filled with horrible monsters, area where like dark magic lives. And that's where they were all on a train in the middle of it, because there's this big city in the middle of the kind of, I don't want to call it a country, but of the middle of this like wasteland,
Yeah.
that they were all headed to.
No, well, that answers another question, which I was going to say, uh,
I
which is
got,
is it
I'm
is it
I'm on top of
homebrew?
things.
Because I think it's like the second question that I wrote, which was God of Helm / Protection homebrew? Question mark.
So the god of Helm is not a homebrew. That's a god that exists within Dungeons and Dragons, and it is the god of protection. I believe so anyway. Actually, now that I think about it, I can't exactly be sure, because a lot of the gods of our pantheon, some of them, like one of our cleric is Coralon is his god, and it's like the god of elves and arcana. I can't remember if Helm was I mean, I could probably just look this up, but a lot of there's some names that I used just the entire backstory, and literally just, yes, Helm is a Forgotten Realms god. So I want to make
Okay.
sure on that. But I was thinking to myself, because there's some gods that are like fully homebrew, and then there are some gods that are like not homebrew, that everything's the same, but I just changed the name. Um, But yes, Helm is something that we took away from that I just kind of imported over into the world.
I guess the next question really, because this is more of a selfish question now. As
Go
not
ahead, be
only
selfish.
as not only a DM but also an actual designer of a tabletop game. For gods, I have usually come up with very on the nose names. Tempus, the father of time. Tempus meaning time in Latin. Vitae, the god of life, basically the god of nature and biological life. Again, Vitae
Give me the
being
next one. Give me the next one, and I'll see if I can guess what they're the god of based on
okay,
how on the nose.
okay,
Okay.
okay. So the next god, I actually have a couple of ones. Uh, uh okay. This one's gonna be a bit weird. I'll actually tell it. Kovar, spelt Covah. Kovar.
Ova. The god of darkness.
Uh, Close-ish. His name is Havoc backwards. Uh,
Oh, I like that a lot.
uh,
That's
the
pretty cool.
the only god that I actually haven't ever confirmed whether or not it's he, she, they, it, whatever. We actually just usually call it because it's a force rather than an actual thing that like a god that actually would have a form or body or a sentience. It's more like this semi-sentient essence of
Okay.
elemental destruction. But no, it's kind of interesting to see when people create homebrew gods or even like make them up on the spot. I don't know what specifically is your process for naming them or for coming up with them.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, I'm a big fan of, I think that, there's this saying that like good artists create and great artists like steal. In that, a lot of, all of human history has there's been smarter people than I have and more cool and interesting people that have come up with stuff, especially when it comes to a world like Dungeons and Dragons, which already exists. So I find myself, in homebrewing a world, it's such a daunting task sometimes that I don't think it hurts to take away something. If all you need is a god of life, you can just like grab Paylor from the wiki and throw it in there and just make it your own when you need to. Like if you wanted to, like I think I changed the name of our goddess of night just because I wanted it to be like a little bit different. Also, if you're a person who like has a cast of your like a play group that watches a lot of like Critical Role or Dimension 20 and knows all has their own idea of how certain gods exist in another world. Sometimes it helps to just like change the name of the god.
Yeah.
But yeah, I created the one of the homebrew things that, and now I'm worried that it's not homebrew because I'm uh
Oh no,
because
you're on the spot now.
yeah, I know. So I'm like googling very quickly to make sure I did make this up because I'm certain I did, but I'm worried that something exists similar to what I've created. But I have there is sort of like you were describing, not like a deity per se, but there is a pantheon, but there is a specific worship belief or like form of worship in the world that I created called they worship this concept called the gray, which is everything that's not black and white that we know of. It's sort of this like ethereal other that exists in between
Kind of like a
all
neutral
all things.
limbo sort of thing, rather than an actual
Sure.
god or entity.
Right, I can't remember, but I was reading a piece of fiction and it was there's like I can't remember what it was, but there's
I
this
can think
concept
of.
that like yeah, good.
I was going to say I can think of one that actually uses the grey, but it's more of an era than it is an actual
Okay.
area, which is in Dark Souls. There was no an age known as the Age of Grey,
Mm.
where it was only dragons and creatures lived in a sort of like an essence where there was only enough light to see, but there was no darkness to create night. So it was
Oh.
just a constant era of grey, and these creatures lived forever. But then all
My
of a sudden, no god.
No, I was gonna say that my idea for the gray kind of came about because one, there is a sort of cosmic horror element to the campaign where there is like this like sort of Cthulhu-esque presence that is kind of terrorizing the world. And I always thought in a lot of different parts of fiction, there is like, or maybe not a lot, but there's this, I guess, this trope that I've seen of like, if you worship, there's like all of the gods around the table, but that, at the temple that people can worship, but maybe there is just um, like a little placard or a little offering to maybe the gods that we're not aware of, or there's like a place in a like a cemetery to remember people who have died who no one remembers. This idea of like lending credence just because that we don't acknowledge it or know of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and also doesn't mean that it doesn't have power. And so the gray stands in for like a catch-all of like, we know that there are these gods and we have, but that doesn't, like history has a tendency to erase certain things that don't, I guess, conform with the stories that like we need. Like we like forget things and we change things. That's true of all myth. And
Yeah.
so I thought it would be cool to have like a following in my world of people who specifically are like, hey, we don't know what this thing is. We don't know if it's there or like what it is or what it could be, but it's probably important because there are gods in this world. So we should, send a little bit of worship towards the gray way. You know what I mean?
It is kind of similar to the way that I've done, as I said, Kovar, which is in one of the campaigns that we're currently running, the ones that we stream for the dev plays. We actually have it that my brother is playing as a monk named Monk, and he actually his whole like monastery is based around they're called the Children of Havoc, and they believe that Kovar is not necessarily a god that will answer your prayers, but instead instills a teaching of your own will one day be able to help you forcibly control or manifest strength against the forces of Kovar. And it's
Oh,
this thing
okay.
of he, unlike all of the other religions where it's like, oh, you have commandments and stuff like this, it's literally Kovar doesn't care because Kovar is a living essence of force.
Right.
And so therefore, like, every single one of the different powers that you can sort of understand, it's this thing of like, oh, a monk of Kovar will be struck by lightning, and they don't blame Kovar for it, but nor do they thank him for it. It's this thing of, you were testing me and I was not yet ready, therefore I need to get stronger, or therefore I need to be more prepared or more certain of something. And it's like, oh, you burned down, your house burned down in this horrible way, therefore it was because that you were not prepared enough, or because that it is a sign that you must go ahead. It is this neutral force that some people create this almost, there is a reason for it, and these people are like, no, there is no reason. Fire can be good to help heal and warm and cook, or it can be used to destroy and burn down, just as erratic as lightning and electricity can be in a storm, but it is also a form of, natural destruction and devastation. Whatever strikes against it, it was meant to be, sort of thing. And it's this whole thing of
I like that.
they don't know if their god is ever listening, and it's the only one that allows you to sort of grab essence from all of the four different damaging elements of extreme heat, extreme cold, electricity, and radiant energy, but none of them can be considered as divine or holy. So if you use it against a demon or abomination or something, it doesn't do holy damage, because
Yeah.
Kovar is a force and has no opinions of good or bad.
It sounds like Kovar is like in itself a sort of like third perspective almost.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I like that a lot. That's pretty cool.
I really like the concept of the grey as well. I really kind of like that. I know a friend of mine, Alfie. He really loves Eldritchian cosmic horrors, and he likes the concept of having it where it's like, it doesn't necessarily need to look like a human, and so on and so forth. And I think having a force that, again, as you said, a mystery. If people know that there are gods, where's the faith in it? Where's the mystique in the concepts of what they are? So I think that's pretty neat.
I felt pretty smart designing it, I should say.
You
I like
should.
I was like because I thought I got really philosophical and I was like, yeah, like what? Like there's the gods, but like if like the gods are there, like what is and isn't a god? And I was like, you know what, this is too complicated. We're gonna make it the gray and it can be sort of like a catch-all for everything else because eventually your party's gonna ask like, you know, who's the god of like sandwiches? Like which god handles sandwiches? And it's like, I don't know. Maybe they got forgotten because they were the god of sandwiches, and so you can worship the gray and you'd be worshiping the god of sandwiches. But in that same realm, like there's like, you know, like the vast eldritch horrors that existed beyond time are also the gray. So it's you know, choose your pick. You know, when you're worshiping it, it all is and isn't equally important.
I could talk to you for ages about like weird gods and stuff like that. In D&D and in fantasy and mystical realms, I love that kind of thing. Although I do have more questions about the character.
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel like I've gotten off topic. I've pulled you away.
We've gotten on topic. It was a group effort. We held hands and walked down this road together. Neither one was leading the other.
I guess you could say it's almost this fog. It's not white, but not black. It's this fog
sort of in the middle.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah. If only there was a word for it.
Yeah,
Colour.
but we'll come up with it later.
So you said that Prior, he gets his name through the fact that he's no longer calling himself his real name, and no one else actually knows his original name. Where exactly did you get his name from, Prior? Like this nickname, anyway.
So this was actually the name that everyone knew the character by for about like 15 sessions before he actually decided to reveal his name. Prior, I mean, it just the word, it means to like exist or to come before.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a prior is also like prior is also the name of like a person who, it's like a religious
I think it's the
name.
first of the church, like a first leader of the church. I think.
Yeah. I know it has like an old English like relevance to, I think.
Don't put this on me.
No, yeah. Sorry, you're sort of the young English. I don't mean you. We're not talking about you. You know, it goes Old English
in the comments. How wrong
Yeah.
I am about that. But...
It goes Old English, Young English, and then Old American, Young American. I think in that order. So I don't know where we fall on that spectrum, but I think Prior is also. I know that Prior is a religious name as well. I want to say it has something to do with monks or friars, but it's an important title. I believe. I'm not exactly sure.
I think you're right. I just don't know what it exactly means for them. I know
That's
it's a figurehead, or at least a leader.
Correct. My hope is to not look like an idiot on the internet most of the time. So I'm trying to avoid saying something that I'm not exactly sure is true. But yeah, the idea that Prior, in a sense, means like something before, and also has this sort of religious significance, is sort of, I think, you know, kind of what was explained to me on why he went with that name. And I mean, a name is the naming convention was always like a big part in Prior's story. Because so much of his like character sort of design revolved around getting the name of the bandaged man.
Yeah.
And this idea of like secrets and revealing those secrets and the power that you know names have. So we thought it would be a cool, you know, sort of not mechanical, but a sort of like gameplay aspect to kind of keep his name hidden for a while. His name was actually revealed in the party had just retrieved an artifact and were they were crossing an ocean to try and get to the next country. And while they were on the boat, Prior, in a particularly like low moment, was constantly like reminded. He's a warlock. His patron, the bandage man, was like consistently reminding him of this, like, you know, the pain that he feels, and using that pain as a motivation to get him to do what he needs. And in a feeble attempt to destroy his book, his tome, and casting it into the ocean. He first tried to cast it into the ocean. It didn't work. He had tried to burn it, and in doing so, the book, I guess, turned on him and revealed his name, carving his name in flames, singeing his name, his real name into the boat, is sort of a way to remind Prior that he can't he like to remind him that he can't really escape from the person that he was before, because the person that he was is the reason he's doing what he's doing. He can't hide behind this like fake name that he had like given himself.
No, I think that's a really interesting way of doing it in the storytelling perspective. I mean, as I've spoken on these before, we've had many different characters in campaigns that I've played in that have names similar to this. As serious as Feltheleb, that means son of the sun, and his father is supposed to be this character who has like the ability to turn into fire, but then later on people discover that he actually has the ability to turn into like solar flames. So basically, he can generate heat that does two different types of damage. That's energy and fire. So even if you have a resistance or an immunity to fire, you still take damage, and so on and so forth. And they
That's
call
very
him
cool.
Daybreak, the sun, and he has to live up to this expectation of eventually being either as powerful as, or being able to be the person who defeats him, so that he can rightfully take his place as the same level of hero that his father was. And all the time people are saying like Phileas Soul, son of the sun, that's his name. He's always going to be reminded no matter what he does. Eventually at the end of the campaign that we had, he wanted to have his name be remembered for something. So he actually said that I'm thinking that my hero name might be Equinox, the peak of summer.
Oh, yeah.
To have this thing that he is the greatest moment of the hottest season, but it's that thing of it's always fleeting, that like as powerful as I will be, and I might be able to defeat my father in this one special move or something, I will never be as good as the actual sun, because I don't burn as bright. I'm just sort of the sun. I'm sort of the sunshine that comes from it, the great heat, the weather on this one day sort of thing. And it is that
Interesting.
fleeting.
That's interesting that you chose that they've chosen the equinox, because that, I think in Latin that literally means equal night. Nox is the Latin word for night, because it's the day, it's
I
the
think
day.
it's Equinox. I could be completely wrong about that, because my
The
brother's
reason,
really clever at naming things, but I
yeah,
can't remember.
I think because the equinox is when the daytime and the nighttime are like equal in length. I think that's the way that works. But anyway, I find that really interesting. I think that's a cool. Uh,
So the next thing I actually have to ask about this character, because obviously we spoke about his name and his church, his god. I actually had one here. Well, okay, so what was it like? Maybe it was only in backstory, I guess. Because originally I was going to ask this question, but I guess this is kind of important, which is, what is it like to give a player a childlike figure in a campaign setting? Like, I guess it's more. I guess it
it
wasn't as prolific, considering it was more of a journey to get back to.
one thing that I have really I don't know if my players will ever end up listening to this. I'm gonna send it to them, but I don't know if they will listen. But I commend all of my players, like, are have family members and have like people that they love and care about, in cities that they're from, or like there's only one of my characters who has sort of a like an orphaned sort of background, but for the most part they all have family members. And we talked about, the player of Luther and I talked about what we kind of wanted his backstory to be, and he came up with this idea of having this like this child, the one that he's kind of going on the adventure for, and that he's a father. And of course, if he's gonna have a father, we put a mother character in there, and it felt almost, like I could tell when we were doing it that it was gonna be sort of an emotional aspect, because like we're a bunch of, we're young, like we're each of us in our like mid to late 20s. We don't have children, but it certainly was definitely interesting talking to him about what that sort of emotional aspect would be. And as credit to the guy who plays Luther, um, I mean, he tries his best to really come in to be that father figure. And every time Callie is brought up and he talks about her and he remembers her and he does things in service to her, he does a really good job of role playing it. And it's those, I don't know if that sort of answers the question. It was when
No,
it
I
came
think it does.
to, yeah, like I was never, I tend to not tell my players no. Uh, I always try to want to explore things that they want to explore because I see Dungeons and Dragons as collaborative storytelling. And if we want to explore something, like I'm not gonna like make roll a d20 to see how cool your kid is. I want to play like I want to play out the stories the way that we want to. So when he came up with that idea, I was like, yeah, like that sounds so cool. I tend to think whenever a player gives me an idea of something that's like very interesting, I don't want to shy away from that.
No, no, absolutely. I mean that definitely answers my question really, because I think it's very important to actually have, as you said. I do disagree with one thing though. I don't think it's just D&D. I think it's every tabletop RPG.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
gonna
I
be
didn't mean to
finicky. No,
imply
no,
that it's only.
I'm kidding. I'm messing with you. I know what you meant. But no, I definitely agree with you though. It is a collaborative story effort. It's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts, and it's one of the reasons why I do these almost interview-like things here on Campfire Stories, because I want people to be able to share those experiences, because it is about a storytelling aspect, and if the storytelling aspect is strong enough, then telling a story should be the equivalent of telling any kind of story, or like round a real campfire, and it should be that. I think that there is no greater ability than the human mind than to be able to tell it, like which I'm now going to get into the second part, which you can answer however you want. You can decide not to answer, because it might even further create the possibilities for people's imagination. But what was Pryor's race? And I was going to say class, but I figured it out. And also, you did actually say during this moment, he's a warlock. He's a warlock to the bandage
Well,
man.
well, this is actually something interesting. So, I will say I don't think he would mind me sharing it all. But the character is a human. We have in our party a human, a half elf, a Githyanki, a Warforged, Fire Genasi, and a Tabaxi on our party. So you gotta have the token human.
A
Um,
Githyanki. Sorry, what's a Githyanki?
it's a Githyanki is this. God, how do I describe? I hope I'm pronouncing it this right, because it's either Githyanki or Githyanki,
Don't worry,
but
I can't pronounce Iquiqui. It's
they're
either Iquiqui or Iquiqui. I don't know.
they're they're a this is so we have a sort of different thing, but in Dungeons and Dragons, they are a race of creatures. They have like green skin. They kind of look like elves, but they kind of look like Voldemort and elves, but if they were like a little bit like green, they're like Voldemort, elves, and green people. I'm trying to think what book. I want to say it's, oh gosh, I can't remember which book they're in, but one of the books that my player has that I like don't have. So but I let them do. There are the Githyanki are a race of people from the astral plane, and they are essentially like mind flayers, like took like a race of creatures and just like enslaved this race of creatures for like the longest time. And those were the Githyanki. They were essentially like a slave race. Um, and eventually broke apart and were able to like take over, like escape from the confines of the mind flayers. That's sort of the
Oh,
there's
okay.
two flavors of them, but I can't remember the difference. I don't know if I don't know the difference off the top of my head. I'm hoping I'm not saying that they sound very similar. I cannot for the life of me remember the difference, but there's two like flavors of them, and the short term is Gish, so that's what he is.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't specifically know. Like I've heard every single one of them. Fire Genasi is cool. Warforged. I always like kind of like stray very far away from Warforged, for a couple of reasons in fantasy. But I also really like them. It's a weird love, curiously hate
We
relationship.
the we actually the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zerai, which are the two different kind of Gith. But anyway, uh yeah, the player who plays him is actually like he's a wizard and he's a Githyanki, and he's actually playing the wizard class from Matt Mercer's book, The Explorers of Wildemount, because that book had come out right when we had started the campaign. But I love him. The war guy who plays the Warforged. This is actually you'll notice I said Warforged and Fire Genasi. That's because he was a Warforged and then he got turned back into a Fire Genasi. There's a lot
Okay.
underlying this. I am a big fan of not a campaign that's played over the course of like a year or so. 2 years can get like really, really daunting, and you can get, I think, worn out, which some of my players were doing. And this is all leading into what I was saying about our warlock. He's not a warlock totally anymore. We did like a class change. He was like, "Hey, can I change my class? I want to be like part bard and part some other stuff. I want to multi-class, but like I don't want to end the campaign, and I don't want to like change my character. I love my character." And I said, "Look, if we go through a very large character development point in your character story, if we can justify it through narrative, I'll let you change your class. Like I don't have a problem letting you change your class." So that's what we did. When he finally revealed the name of his patron, I let him do a class change. And so he is now, I think, part warlock and part bard at this point.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I honestly just, I mean, it's only been like 30 or 40 minutes, and I've learnt so much being not only like a DM but also a game runner in general, just from this. So so this is
I appreciate that.
well, I mean, like I sometimes try not to give my characters too many moments where they get to rearrange and rechange their levels, but I do allow it where it's like, okay, look, I'll level with you here. You want to learn something new. There's a possibility of you gaining it from this area. However, there has to be a reason as to why you go here. And I don't often give them meta knowledge, but if they feel like as if they're like really wearing out, then I can sometimes do that. Most of the time, though, one of my players does decide to just go off and just go, I'm going to do this really chaotic stuff until I either find that my character is playable again or end up my character dying and just play a new character, which I feel like is a bad sense. But to be fair, I do have a couple of players that are very fickle. They're quite fickle with a
Yeah.
lot of the characters that they play. But I
Well,
think my
in the
no,
yeah,
go.
sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, in the back of my mind, I always have to remember that, like, it's always good to like. It always happens where I'll get DM brain and I'll be like, oh, I want to make sure I have a cohesive world, and I gots to be telling a good story, and the combat has to be kicking. Like, I want to make it good, and I wanted to make it frequent enough. But at the end of the day, I always have to sit back and think in my mind when I'm DMing, like, oh, like this is like a bunch of people getting together to like play a game. And if people aren't having fun like playing the game, like if the thing that's stopping you from having fun is like, oh, I picked a warlock at the beginning of the campaign, but Fel doesn't put a whole bunch of combat as some of like compared to some of the other DMs I had, or if Fel, game isn't conducive to the play style. Like I don't want to make more work for Fel, but I have this character and I'm just so burnt out playing like 8 level warlock. I wish I could change it. If my player comes to me and tells me like points to me that scenario, I don't give it like ultimately it's a game, and as long as like everyone's cool with it, no one is gonna like, it's not gonna hurt anyone, it's not gonna hurt my feelings. Like, let's change it so that we can have more fun because we're playing a game together.
Yeah.
It's like if you're playing like to me, it's like if you were like you've played baseball like every week for like 4 years, and then all of a sudden your one of your person was like, "Hey, could we like play soccer or sorry, let me change it up, football, for
I
you
am
for
not
you."
offended by either of the
Uh,
terms. Continue.
I could have said cricket as well,
I
but
think you mean rugby, but go on.
yeah.
No, yeah. No, I
uh,
know what you mean. I mean,
yeah. So like, if someone was like, "Yeah, can we play rugby?" Like, it wouldn't be fair to me to be like, "Well, but I've worked so hard." Like, it makes sense to say, like, I have worked so hard building this baseball diamond, or I don't know if I really want to change it. And oh man, would it be fair? Because everyone brought all their equipment to play baseball. Like, I don't think it would be fair to change now. But like, the reality is you're gonna lose players if you don't make sure that they're having fun. And to that end, the most important thing for both DMs and for players to do is to just like communicate with each other and just say like, "Hey, this is where I'm at." Because so often I've found that like we'll all just be sitting there playing the game as usual with the rules as written, but we're not thinking critically about like, are we actually having fun? Like, would changing one thing around make things more fun?
it's 100% true though. Like, if anyone's ever seen any of the previous episodes of almost any of the different like videos that we talk about DMing, playing a game, doing anything to do with tabletop RPGs, we say biggest thing, communication. You don't like this, communicate. You don't like how it's made, communicate. You don't like how someone is acting, communicate. You don't necessarily like the character or the way that they're going, communicate. You feel like something's... It's communication, communication, communication. Because, funnily enough, a game where you have to talk to each other, because the human mind
All
is the
talking,
process...
dude. It's talking to each other in math. Those are the two things you do.
Yes, exactly. And it's the thing that, like, my girlfriend always tries to play characters that are simple, but she will come to me with this thing of like, I really want to play this character, this build. I went, okay, so this is how you do it. And eventually she goes, okay, this is really complicated. And I was like, okay, so just think of it this way. And I have to write it down a specific way because, again, it is that whole thing of like, again, it's talking and math. And she eventually has come to me with this character concept of, okay, I want to kind of be like a warrior, like Wonder Woman, flight and super strength. I was like, awesome. Here's how you can build it. Here's how it's done. Here's how it's as simple as possible and as potent as possible. And she just eventually shaved off all the abilities that she didn't think that she needed and just had these specific things. It's one of the most overpowered builds, and she says, why is it that the most simple ones are the most overpowered? It's like, because basically there's not a lot of utility abilities, but if you're playing a character who is simply a warrior, it will be the perfect moment so that then other characters get a chance to be the characters who can be like, okay, so we can do this stealthily, we can do this way, we can mess with things on a different spectrum and further increase possibilities rather than just doing it in this one way. And there have been
Right.
characters that, or enemies that she has gone up against that she can't easily beat just by throwing a punch or swinging a sword at it, because
Hmm.
certain creatures might have resistances or immunities to physical damage and so on and so forth, and therefore that's the teamwork that comes with it, synergizing the two possibilities of combat and utility. And I think it's so important, especially now, to actually have that possibility of, as you said, communication of like not only just player to DM but player to player.
I absolutely agree.
I was actually having a look over at some of the other questions, and I think I have one specific one that I think was the probably the biggest one for me, in the terms of more of the character as a whole. Uh,
Yeah.
which was okay. So we already know the race. We already know the things. Specifically, the warlock wanted or at least the patron wanted the warlock specifically prior to find their name so that they could be freed. Uh, did you always know what dungeon or what location the name was going to be, and did you also know what the name of the god was going to be from the get go.
My players, if you're listening to this, turn it off. Don't listen any further than this. No, well, the answer is, my players had to get like three main artifacts across this world, and I knew at the very beginning where each of the artifacts was. Um, I did not know where, and I knew that I wanted to tie certain areas to certain characters, but I did not know the name of the god when I started out. I did not know what was going to happen with the god when I started out, and I didn't know where he was going to learn that name. There's so much of my campaign is I have these like general ideas, but I've learned through using them that like I have all these like little concepts, and I visualize them as like you have like a cork board, and I have each of my characters are up there, and surrounding the cork board are all of these different concepts. One of them, for example, being the name of this deity. It's now up to me as the DM of like when and where do I draw the strings from that name to that character, because I have free range to do it. If I found that in homebrewing, because it's homebrew, it's not like it's like set written out. It's not like I'm in the Curse of Strahd where I like one castle is stuck in a particular place, where like we're gonna meet these NPCs here. I have free range to put things where I want. So having a better idea of story structure, and knowing like it wouldn't make sense if, for example, the character were like learns the name. I mean, it's very important to his character. So if he were to learn the name of his god, be just because they picked the right, they went to the right artifact, museum day one, that wouldn't make for a very compelling story, and it wouldn't be a very like character, defining
So I guess what you're saying is
moment.
you had a minimum amount of tasks for it to happen before it actually could be possible, rather than having it linked to a specific set one.
I wouldn't say a minimum amount of tasks. I would say that I was looking for an opening, for the I was waiting for things to line up in my head narratively to allow the sort of change to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the character, for him to learn the name, he left the party and like went out on his own to this place, was captured and kidnapped, stuck in a hole, struggled with his own insanity, and then like reached out to the god that he had like previously rebuked in order to escape himself, and now he's here in this dungeon. If I don't reveal the name of that god, then if I wait until another 18 sessions, it's not going to be as impactful. It's not going to be as good storytelling. Now I mean, I have to give this character motivation to continue with his quest. So I had that plan in the background, but like to do that thing before or after that point doesn't make sense to me narratively. And if I control the narrative, I don't know why I would, set it off just because I wanted to, if that makes
I
sense.
think it's a good, important notion to actually have on the sort of the, I guess on the I guess on the tail end of this subject specifically is, if you are a narrator or a DM or a GM or whatever, and you're in control of the story, it has to be at the best possible moment for the story, rather than for the mechanical aspects of like, oh, right now they're really struggling, so I'll give them something that gives them really good power. Instead, it should be, okay, they're really struggling mechanically. Maybe I should loosen up on the terrible things, or maybe I should actually have signposts saying, "Don't go here." Sort of like, not literally signposts,
Right.
maybe literally, but having it more. If your characters are struggling in character, in the actual role play aspects, their characters in game are sort of feeling this sort of aspect of something that is the best moment for them to actually arrive at a conclusion for themselves, then that's when it's the best moment for the story. Or even, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a struggle. It could actually be the best moment for them to actually have this sort of kick in the pants, or even this
Right.
this amazing uplifting moment. where
and you have to and you have to like also like be realistic with yourself. Like you're not like this isn't you sitting down to write a book. There's like there's a group involved. They don't know what's happening. You don't know what's happening, and you're trying your best to like create a lot, like to create this story together. And it's not always going to be perfect or as impactful as you want it to be. But you have, like you were saying, you have like some control. So like don't and you can't. I think you could back me up on this as someone who DMs, but like you can't always control what your players are gonna do. So it's not
100%.
always it's not always easy to like anticipate. For example, my our Warforged, he was an artificer, and he has spent every waking moment of free time in this campaign building a like what is essentially a nuclear bomb. He
Of
told me at the
course.
beginning of the session, he was like, I want to build. I know we're going to need it at some point. I want to build a nuclear bomb. Now, a little bit of backstory: his character was a fire genasi who had the same affliction as Callie, the daughter of Luther Everborn, and he was a very very wealthy mechanic who found a way to, or very very bright mechanic, I should say, who found a way to transport human or I guess humanoids into the shell of the Warforged, kind of like transmit their soul. And he did that to himself in order to save himself.
Mm.
Um, he has spent the entire campaign coming to, building this like nuclear bomb, this like power source. He was using all of his resources to do it. And then they got back to his hometown, which was one of the last places, and he found out that his real body was actually still alive. And I told him, I said, and he was not, he kind of had already guessed that his real body, quote unquote, was alive still, although in this like dormant state and being kept alive by a friend. What he didn't expect was when I was like, you look, this thing has been your obsession the whole time. I know that you're back with your body, and you think that the campaign's gonna end with you getting back in your body. But I don't know that to be true. What I do know is if you get rid of this thing you've been working on, this whole campaign, I will let you switch back into your Warforged or back into your Fire Genasi body, which was kind of his like ultimate goal. In the end, but it was like no one besides me and him kind of knew when I was like, if you want to use Project Starburst, it could provide enough power to use the transferring process. And it was just him and I where he was like, oh my gosh, oh no. But it didn't take him really any time. He's like, "Yep, you know what? Done." And we did the transfer process, and he moved from his Warforged body into the Fire Genasi, and it was a really powerful moment that like I had to be ready for that sort of possibility because I kind of saw like I had to feel throughout the story where it was going to get to that point.
I think the most impactful moment that I've had was in any of my campaigns was a moment where two characters were killed, but it was under the factor of a character was killed because pretty much this character was named Cass. He was the human in amongst all of these like super beings and sort of almost kind of demigod like characters, and it's this thing of like this human. He had guns and he was sort of like a cowboy sort of thing. It was like, all right,
Yeah.
he's the most charismatic, and he also is the most quite literally down to earth. So he was the most suitable for the role of leader, and every one of them respected him, regardless of what powers they had and what powers he didn't have. They all respected him. And there was a moment where this interdimensional being is very angry because they went to another universe, and they took this magic like scientist and brought them into a non-magical world, and they were like, okay, can you do this for us? Can you help us build this technology that doesn't exist? And she was like, yeah, sure, okay. And one of the characters overhears them, and they're not a multiversal traveler, and they go, wait, magic exists? And this interdimensional being just comes out, and it's like, you've broken the rules of the multiverse. You're not supposed to upset the balance. And so they fight this interdimensional being, and he's in this like weird armor, and he immediately gets one of the other characters in this headlock, and he just says like, with all of my strength, I could snap this character's neck. Back off. Give me the witch, and I will leave you all alone. And still in this headlock, the human says, "Do you trust me?" And the hostage player character just goes, "Yes." And he just shoots at this guy, pings off the armor, and goes, "Bad move." Snaps the character's neck, and then immediately goes to the human and impales him. Both characters die, and they're able to bring back one. The other one, they have to use this kind of weird time magic. And they keep trying to use this thing, and it's like, okay, you only have this many days left of living. And it's in this constant state of, like, this weird, horrible motion. But this other character, it's like, he has this way of storing power on these little bands. But if he does so, he knows that inevitably, because basically there's this one character who can rewind time, but only on one person at a time and up to a certain amount of hours. If he does so, and he fails to do it, then he can't rewind them for up to 4 hours. And by that point, this character would have been dead for 4 hours, and therefore there's nothing he can do. He can't rewind them ever again or anymore.
Okay.
And it was this moment where he just said to this other character, "Look, you've got powers on these bands, right? Well, I've failed, but technically it's you who could do this again." And this character, he's like this multiversal traveler, he goes, "No, if I do this, then I'm literally breaking the rules again, and this basically this angel or this god or this demon or whatever, he'll come back and he'll kill us." And just went, "I don't care, just save him." And it was this perfect moment of everyone realised how much they cared about the character. To the point of which that just sort of like this moment. And since the character, the dead character, was rewound, they never knew how much everyone sacrificed just to bring them back to life. I think that is a perfect moment of sort of story plus character plus mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have anything else to add to this? I mean, I to be honest, you've added and gone through every single one of my questions.
I'm what can I say? I'm just pretty good.
No, I mean, thank you so much for coming on. To be honest, when I first asked you, I had no idea if you'd say yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I had a really good time, and I don't think I have anything else to add. Can I plug some stuff? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I go by Feltheleb on Twitter and YouTube. I'm in the process of like moving, so like I have for the past couple months like haven't been making a lot of YouTube content on my YouTube, but I post a lot on Twitter. My screen name is Feltheleb. You can also catch me on. I do a live stream game every Monday night, 6 o'clock EST. And that is on the channel of a friend named Captain Cheeky. You can look up that name. The name of the game is Antumbra EOE, Echoes of the Eclipse. And I also play, I want to say every other Sunday, which I think is more accurate, but it's a show that takes place every Sunday on a channel called Tall Tales. I'm one of the main cast. It's like an improvised D&D 5e one-shot creation machine that we do games based off of audience suggestions. I'm one of the main cast members with Runesmith, Logan, and Jacob from XP to Level 3, and Aiden, who is an animated D&D content creator as well. And you should check out all of those fun little projects because they bring me a lot of joy.
No, I mean, I'm currently I think I joined the same Discord group as all of you, and I'm just like, man, there's so much content I need to watch and catch
Gosh,
up on.
yeah, dude, I know I have had like no free time in the past like couple of months, and I just am so behind on like that's the issue of like being friends with and like knowing a bunch of content creators. It's like, when am I gonna find time to support all of my friends?
I actually, another thing that I guess I could also plug is, if you guys are interested in listening to more stuff that Fel is in, Fel also has a part on his channel that is just a bunch of stuff that he's done, collaborations, and I know that you were not only in the last episode of Crap Guide to D&D, but you're also in an episode of Players and Podcast and Players, or Players and Podcasts with
Oh yeah,
Cowboy Shane.
with Cowboy Shane. Yeah, he's Shane and I are actually in Antumbra EOE together. Where that group consists of a bunch of content creators. Some of them are not content creators, but Captain Cheeky, Eldridge Sugar, who's also another member on Tall Tales, as well as Vitamin Dieter, who is as well. They all make content, and we all play together. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have like a list of my like collabs that I've been in with. Yeah.
I may not have attempted to watch like at least 2 hours worth of it last night.
I've like done like I guess if you were to add Tall Tales into it and Tumbra in, well, it'd be like 3 times as long. But I've kept a couple in there. I've been fortunate enough to interact with some pretty cool content creators, which I now count you as a part of. I'll definitely throw this on that playlist as well.
Well, thank you very much. No, honestly, it's in all honesty, I know that you've come on here, but it's been a privilege to have you on here. Thank you very much for joining me. And for any of you guys who are actually interested in listening to any more of the sort of videos on this, definitely check out Campfire Stories. Check out the Campfire Story episode, although I doubt that you would be here without listening to it, as Fel talks about one of his PCs in one of the games that he DMs for. So if you're interested in having a listen to that, definitely check it out. And obviously check out his channel. And obviously, I am on GoJo, aka at AnimiteTales on Twitter, or AnimiteTales on YouTube. Please continue to look after our content, or look out for our content, I should say. Thank you very much again for joining, and thank you very much, Fel. Would you like to sign off this episode?
Is there a way I should sign off?
No, just anything.
Okay. Bye everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I didn't prepare anything for this.
That's okay.
I haven't been stuttering I have a really bad problem where I'm like always mumbling and don't know what to. This is a bad way to end the. Goodbye everybody.
Thank you very much. Goodbye everyone.